Kluge.
Right. Kluge. That's we're not going to put that one in Urban Dictionary, anything like that. we put my wife's nickname for me in Urban Dictionary to try to.
Oh no,
we're old people. We're not actually cool. Nobody's commented on it or anything. All right, let's go. When Deshaun Watson takes his next snap on an NFL field, which uniform will he be wearing? That more on the couch. New Football Guy staffer Dave Kluge. Dave's throwing in the deep end. Deshaun Watson, where's he going to be playing? Maybe in 2021, maybe in 2022, the next time he plays.
Well, you got a little bit ahead of me there because I think that the next time we see him play, it is going to be in a Texans uniform. Ooh. I just don't think it's going to be this year. I think that he is going to stand firm. He's going to hold out. And the Texans, they have something fantastic in Deshaun Watson, a 25-year-old superstar. And as much as I understand why he wants to get out of Houston, I also understand why Houston wants to retain him. So I think we're going to see this hardball get dragged out for a little bit longer. But at the end of the day, they've got the contract. They're going to call the shots. And I don't think Watson is going to get traded as much as I would love to see it.
Wouldn't we all, especially him? And look, I said earlier, it depends whether you look at a contract as a marriage. Why do you want to be married to someone that doesn't want to be married to you? Or servitude, kind of, like, hey, I own you now. And I think that's how the Texans see it. But what I like about your prediction, or where I think you took it one step farther, because I think that Watson is serious enough to take this into the regular season. And then the question is, does that penetrate the bubble around the Texans for them to say, okay, he's serious? Or like you said, do they say, no, we're doubling down? And what do you think, as we've been watching this play out very publicly, like alarmingly publicly? It's almost like if you want to know what's going on with the Texans, the fact that it's so public is the most important fact. How's this all been slanting through your brain as we hear more and more about how the Texans run their shop?
Well, there's been a lot of, stuff on Twitter where he's thrown these underlying messages, and then you've got rumors coming out from other teams saying that they're clearing cap space and making a push for him. So it is a bizarre situation that everything has become so public. I don't think it's what the Texans want, but it is clearly what Deshaun Watson wants. And we're in this day and age now where athletes get the ability to connect directly with their audiences. They used to have to go through PR, or the team was calling the shots. And now with social media, these teams or these players just get to go directly to the audience and make their concerns very well known. So it's different to see, but it's something that we saw happen in the NBA a few years ago, where players were publicly demanding trades, refusing to play, and getting their wishes. And we haven't really seen it so much with the extent on social media in regards to some other players, but there have been other players that have asked for wishes or for trades and then gotten their wishes quickly soon thereafter. So this is kind of a weird one, because with Deshaun Watson already going public, going on social media, making kind of a fuss about this, it's something that I think could get pretty ugly. And then you've got a Houston Texans franchise that you already alluded to is kind of looking at this contract as maybe more of the servitude than a marriage situation. So I think that we're, going to be looking at a little bit of mudslinging over the next couple of years. Yeah. And I think this situation could end up getting dirty.
Yeah, it almost seems like the Texans aren't trying to win in the media as much as they're just not even playing the game at all. Like, what game? There is no game. Yeah. Nothing's at stake here. Everything's already determined. And like you said, it is going to be, in some ways, a public opinion battle, but I don't even know if the Texans are going to be persuaded by that. You said NBA. By the way, folks, Dave Kluge, one of the 3 newest Football Guy staff. We'll have them all on the couch over the next week or so. It's fun. We can stretch out, but because it's the NFL, there's never a downtime. There's never a time that there's not new things to make our brain cells pop. Now, if you folks don't know Dave, at Dave Kluge _FF. And you work for Fantasy Pros. You do some NBA and you do NFL. And I guess I was going to ask you, Dave, tell me something that has made you better at projecting one of the sports that you learned because you project the other sport.
Ooh, man, that is a really tough one. I mean, I really like the connection that I just made, if we can go back to that one, but let's try to think of something different here. So
we'll talk about the player empowerment era. Are you a fan of the player empowerment era, or do you welcome seeing if it's just quarterbacks coming to the NFL, or do you think it's something that's too chaotic or makes fans and their heartstrings get jerked around?
It's something when it first started happening, one of the first players to really do this, to go to the media and make a big stink of it was Jimmy Butler with the Chicago Bulls, made it very apparent that he wanted to get out of Chicago. So at the time, my fandom made me, oh, this is wrong. This is terrible. You shouldn't be able to do that. But over time, it's something that I have come to appreciate. And, it's something where for a long time, NFL players at the end of the day are the moneymakers, but they're not the ones calling the shots. So I kind of like that this player empowerment that players, NFL quarterbacks and other guys are starting to call the shots now. And that if, you're on a team in a situation that you're not happy with the ownership, not happy with whatever, I really like that they have that ability to just make a public stink out of it and go somewhere that they want to play where they can utilize their skill set best.
See, this is Dave. This is where I probably reveal a little too much about how I think about things.
Uh-oh. Are we going to be butting heads right off the bat here?
No. I don't butt heads. I don't butt heads. I can't even, I honestly, that would be interesting to see what it would take for there to be some head butting on the couch. But there's no head butting here. No, I was going to say, kind of to echo what you're saying, I get it. Your employer is the NFL, your employer is the NBA, and your assignment kind of is your team. But I think there's at least a discussion, if not a legal discussion, like a moral, ethical discussion about the draft and whether it's really fair. And I think that in some ways, the player empowerment era is a reaction to that. And it would look very, very different. And I get it, parity, Pete Rozelle, and the salary cap and all those things. And it does make the game more enjoyable or entertaining. But if players could have more freedom, and it's this is nothing new for the NFL. There's Eli Manning, there's John Elway, so this isn't exactly new ground. We have another player that is now popping his head up in the player empowerment era, and it is Russell Wilson. Is there more than like a 0.1% chance that we see Russell Wilson traded?
Well, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I looked at this yesterday, and they already have guaranteed his 2021 salary to him. What is it? Something you might know off the top of your head? I think it's 35 million or something like that.
Yeah, mid-30s, yeah.
Whatever it was, but even if they wanted to trade him right now, they would still be taking on all that dead cap. So I think that a lot of what we saw, let's just call it what it is. This time of year, there's so much clickbait out there. We haven't had the NFL draft. Free agency hasn't opened yet. So people are looking to drum up stories. So the story that we see is that Russell Wilson could get traded in the near future. Now, what does near future mean? Does that mean 12 hours from now, or does that mean a year from now? I think that we're looking more than likely that, Russell Wilson has always been as professional as they come. I think he goes out there, he does his duty, he plays this year. And I think that if he really wants out of there, the Seahawks will do the right thing and try to work out a trade to one of the teams that he wants to go to. I believe the short list he gave was it the Cowboys, Saints, Raiders, and Bears, correct?
And Bears? Huh?
Yeah. Oh man. I can't even get excited about that, man. It feels like every quarterback.
Wait, is that a Bears helmet over your shoulder?
It is a Bears helmet over my shoulder, signed by the one and only Jay Cutler. Wow. It's tough. It's a tough life being a Bears fan, but yeah, I think that Russell Wilson, I think that he will get traded because they're at the point right now where, he was winning for them when he was on the rookie contract. Since he signed his rookie deal, since he signed his extension, they haven't even made it to the NFC conference game. So they had this amazing defense and they were able to pay Marshawn Lynch and get these things done when Russell Wilson wasn't hurting their salary cap. But I think they're at the point now where they might pull in a package for him and go into another full-blown rebuild because outside of Russell Wilson, they don't have a lot of assets right now. So it wouldn't surprise me if he plays this year, does what he does, goes out and wins 10 to 12 games, maybe a playoff game or so in there. And then I think we see him in a new uniform heading into 2022.
I'd like to see it. What have we seen now? Tom Brady win a Super Bowl with a second team. Peyton Manning win a Super Bowl with a second team. Obviously, I've talked about this with Jason Wood earlier this week on the couch. Obviously, by the way that Russell Wilson is communicating with the Seahawks brass through the media, that's not a good sign. It's not a good sign of where the relationship is. And
did you read the full article by The Athletic?
Yeah, and that seemed like it was from the team, right?
Yeah, but there was definitely some stuff in there that was coming from Russell Wilson's camp to try and paint the Seattle Seahawks organization in a pretty bad light. So they've, they kind of stepped it right up rather than just saying, hey, we'd like a trade. They started slinging mud right off the bat.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's no way to read this except that the water is choppy. And the difference between the Houston, other than the fact that the Houston organization is way off the reservation, is that it actually might make sense to trade a 32-year-old Russell Wilson at his peak when your team blueprint doesn't call for a quarterback that has a lot of daring do and making things happen outside of structure, that they may prefer somebody who's more of a game manager or otherwise somebody who's not going to take them to this point. And as long as the Texans aren't doing anything, I think the Seahawks might get something like what the Texans would get for Deshaun Watson, which is 25 versus 32. Deshaun Watson, that's unprecedented. Russell Wilson, precedented, kind of. We go Jay Cutler. We always go back. It's so funny. Jay Cutler's kind of the high water mark for quarterbacks being made available when they were still considered a franchise quarterback. You, by the way, have on your resume there, on your bio, Jay Cutler apologist. How do you end up at Jay Cutler apologist?
Well, how much time do we have? I mean, do we want to spend the rest of the show talking about
as much as you need?
No, I mean, my big thing, I think that like I said, it is torturous being a Bears fan. And Jay Cutler, his last year in Denver, I mean, he was unbelievable. He was a Pro Bowler. He looked like one of the brightest young talents in the league. And then we threw him into Chicago, and everyone was expecting, Super Bowl his first year. They didn't build any sort of supporting cast around him. I'd have to look up the numbers, but I believe it was 85 sacks that he took in his first 2 years. It was 80 something, maybe it was 82, 84, whatever it was. He had passed for over 4,500 yards his final year in Denver, never once hit that mark again. So I think that he was just destined to fail the second he came to Chicago. As much as I love the Bears, they're not a fun team to cheer for. No. Ownership is cheap. Management never seems to, invest in what they should be investing. So, they took this guy who showed a lot of promise on a team that was built in the trenches. They had a phenomenal offensive line, and you'd see it. Jay Cutler would drop back. He'd hit that back foot. He'd make all of his reads, and then he would just throw a dart 50 yards downfield. And then as soon as he came to Chicago, he couldn't even finish his 3-step drop before he had 4 hands in his face trying to pull him down.
Yeah, it's sad. And what about smoking Jay Cutler? Because I have to say, I giggled a lot when the smoking Jay Cutler meme got underway.
Oh my God.
I giggled and giggled and giggled because I really thought it was actually very intuitive. Just the fact that you could Photoshop in a cigarette in any Jay Cutler picture and it worked. Perfect. It worked, but it's that detachment, right? That he never seemed to be. And I suppose people have talked a little bit since Cutler is retired about, well, maybe that's not far off of the truth. But that can also be another reason to really embrace him because he just didn't care.
Yeah, and I kind of liked it, that just no F's given attitude. That's something that kind of resonated with me that I liked a bit. My background on my computer right now is actually still smoking Jay Cutler. It has been, since he left the team. But it's one of those things. I don't even think it's that he showed that he was disinterested or anything like that. It was just his face, just kind of and you'd see him. He'd make this play where he'd be putting his body on the line, diving out for a first down, just getting absolutely pummeled. And like you'd see him showing heart in his play, and then he'd take his helmet off and just. Yeah. So I think it was just his face. I don't think that he was really that disinterested.
Right. Well, and I don't think any of us can truly imagine what it's like. I'll have to get somebody who's played quarterback in the NFL to really talk about it. Well, just because I think that it's truly being at the center of so much pressure, so much attention, and it's a true high wire act. And I understand how you might have to remove yourself. I mean, that's what we're watching. Like we watch these rookie quarterbacks, the soon to be rookie quarterbacks, and try to figure out how they're going to translate. We can look at how fast they are, look at arm strength. We can even look at how they operate in the structure of their offense. But there is just an entirely different level of, your internal clock, the danger you're in, the way, like you said, what Jay Cutler had to deal with, and we can never really predict how a quarterback's going to adjust to that. But I love it. Jay Cutler apologized. And look, let me tell you, I'll date myself here, Dave. In my 5th grade talent show, we did a complete recreation of the Super Bowl shuffle. We
Oh
and I
wow.
lived in Pittsburgh, but that should show you. I lived there's a little south of Pittsburgh, Steelers country, and well, yeah, the Steelers weren't really anything to be too excited about at that point. And yeah, we had our uniforms. I remember I think I was the backup quarterback. Was it Steve Fuller? The backup quarterback got to be in the
Yeah.
Super Bowl shuffle, and then I also had my saxophone. I was a saxophone player, and I got to do the saxophone.
Oh my God. Incredible. You
Yeah,
still have that on video somewhere? Did anyone get
somebody
that for
does.
you?
Somebody
Oh
does.
man.
If
I'm sure
anybody's out
somebody would
there,
pay top dollar for it too.
yeah,
But
yeah.
something that's really nice about social media nowadays is you get to interact with fans from all over the world. So it's kind of tough being a fan when you're in this, industry because you have to look at it from a very objective standpoint. But I assume you're a Saints fan, right?
You have to be. I mean, just because the city of New Orleans loves the Saints, like it's their children.
Yeah. And you see that on social media. I mean, Drew Brees is coming off not a great year, and the majority of people are still supporting him, saying that they'd bring him back at age 43 or 44, and the city just loves him. You see the way Chicago fans act, and it is totally different. Mitch Trubisky, he got drafted. 2 days after he was drafted, he went to a Bulls game. They showed him on the Jumbotron, and the entire freaking stadium starts booing him. Like they just set him up for failure. And
Yeah.
Cutler was the same way. He throws one pick six week 2 or week 3, and that was all it takes before everybody hops on the radio and saying he's a bust and saying that he's a hack. And that's got to get in your head a little bit, no matter how strong you are. But that's also a reason that I love Russell Wilson, because he has taken a lot of crap throughout his career, and he just keeps moving forward. So if there's anybody tough enough for the Chicago media, Russell Wilson's got to be the guy.
Yeah, Russell Wilson. It's almost like he's more like Tom Brady, where he has his own plan, and it's bigger than football. Football's part of it, but he's looking way beyond football.
Oh yeah.
And like you said, no one's going to really knock him off course at this point. And it would be something to see if he ended up in Chicago after everything. It almost would make at least a decade or two of wandering in the wilderness worth it. And Mitchell Trubisky, I still think there's like a 10 or 20% chance Trubisky's going to start week 1. I really do.
I'd say even more than that. I just tweeted it out a couple days ago. And it's one of those things, I don't love Trubisky, but I said this on Twitter the other day, and I think that the best course of action is just for him to stay in Chicago. I mean, he's not great, but neither is anybody that's available in free agency right now besides Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson. So anybody that we bring in is just going to be a bridge quarterback or some sort of project that's going to set us back. We tried it with Glennon, we tried it with Nick Foles, and it just hasn't worked out. So, for all of his faults, he doesn't turn the ball over that much, and he can make plays with his legs. When you've got an elite defense like we do, especially in the twilight, they don't, the clock is ticking on that defense. I say keep beating the drum, bring him back, just dumb down the playbook a little bit and see if we can make another push Bears style, which is through the defense and through the run game.
Yeah, and the one exception out there, the most interesting name outside of Watson and Wilson, of course, Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Oh my gosh.
Everybody can get on board with that. I was on with Mike Shope, WGR in Buffalo. I was on with him earlier today. Fantastic addition to the fantasy community. I love telling the story, Dave, about how the first time I did a show with Mike, he was like, "Whoa, fantasy football, I don't know about it." Now he's in like the experts leagues with us, and he's on the Draft Sharks podcast and things like that. Anyway, he was asking me something like, how for fantasy football do we take advantage of all this quarterback uncertainty? There's best ball drafts going on, there's dynasty leagues or otherwise. Do you have any hot takes, or do you have any way, or we can talk about, there's all kinds of free agent issues hanging in the balance. We're in the tag period. We're waiting to hear about Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin, and so on. Are there any moves or anything that you feel like, hey, in a days, weeks, maybe months, this player's value is going to change, and I want to get out ahead of it?
Yeah, there's 2 players, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, but there are 2 quarterbacks that their value right now, whether it be in a redraft league or in a dynasty startup, because of the uncertainty, you can get them in the 13th, 14th, 15th round. That's Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill. And I have been going after both of those guys late in dynasty leagues right now. I mean, who knows where they're going to be starting next year? Who knows if Drew Brees is coming back? Who knows if Taysom Hill is going to be the week 1 starter? If Winston can end up somewhere else as a starter, maybe a backup. nobody really knows. But the fact that they're almost essentially free right now in these dynasty leagues and offer tremendous upside, those are the two guys that I've been really interested in startup leagues and trying to trade for in dynasty leagues. They're both talented players. I think that Jameis, and let's hear your opinion. I mean, what do you think? Do you think they're going to be bringing Jameis back? Do you think Taysom Hill is going to be the week 1 starter? What do you think here?
So I would say 90%, 80, 90% Winston starts week 1.
Really?
And I really believe that it was kind of a necessity, the mother of invention kind of thing, where for whatever reason, the league kind of moved on from Winston last year. It's fascinating. So we can get into some really interesting stuff, Dave, with how when you're drafted number 1 and number 2, your careers are always tied to each other, right?
Yep.
Luck and RG3.
Yep.
Goff and Wentz, which there's an entire discussion of. Goff and Wentz had roughly similar amounts of success and failure in their first 4 years.
Yeah.
The Rams have to give a first-round pick to get out of Goff's contract, and Wentz, they get a second and probably a first next year in exchange for Wentz. Maybe it was just the Frank Reich connection. Maybe Ty Roseman got really lucky. So then we have Winston and Mariota. Mariota drew, 11 million. He's going this year. I don't think they're going to release him. I think they're probably going to trade him, to be honest. I keep seeing in New England, Mariota, and that makes sense to me. New England, Mariota makes so much sense to me.
It seriously does.
Well, it's the slow play. Like Belichick's going to slow play. Like, yes, we need a quarterback. Yes, I'm interested in everybody. That's what Jeff Howe was writing. But if he's just waiting to see which quarterback does the market value match something close to what I think that quarterback's worth, it's probably Mariota. Winston had no interest whatsoever. I mean, they both at the end of their rookie contracts weren't exactly soaring, but they both still have a lot to offer. Winston gets that 1-year minimum deal, and I really think there's an understanding that it is going to be a competition between Winston and Hill, but I do think that staying with the model they've had, where Hill's mixed in the way he is at all of his jack of all trades positions, especially in the red zone, and then Winston is the classic pocket passer, and I think Winston. I want to say hats off to Winston at this point, because I think so many times we see players at a fork in the road in their career take maybe whoever's offering the most money, and they don't just think what's best for me down the line. Let's play the long game. Not how much money can I make in 2020 or 2021, but who can really rehabilitate my career where I can maybe eventually get another big contract. And of course, why wouldn't you want it to be in New Orleans, both with opportunity coming up with Breeze retiring? I think it's like 99.9% Breeze is retired.
I thought we were going to get that news days after the Super Bowl. That's what I was expecting.
Well, he took that pay cut down to $1 million. So
yeah,
I mean, there really hasn't been a peep down here in New Orleans that he's going to come back. So I think it's a competition, but it's a competition that Winston can win. And then downstream, for guys like Michael Thomas, for Alvin Kamara, I think that it's a better outcome. Although remember, in the last game that Taysom Hill played, Kamara came back with like 6 or 7 catches, and Hill was a top 10 fantasy quarterback. I mean, that's the thing. I like the idea of getting them both, because they're like, one of them is going to be worth more than they both are worth combined right now.
Exactly. One of them, whoever is the week 1 starter, I think is going to be a QB1. I mean, I hate to use the term Konami code, but there's a reason everybody says it. I mean, those running quarterbacks do something special. And then you've got these big guys like Traquan Smith and Michael Thomas that can go up and get jump balls, and that's where Winston excels. But if it does end up, and I don't know the specifics of Winston's contract, is he an unrestricted free agent right now?
Unrestricted free agent. He got like a 1-year deal for the vet minimum last year.
So I love the idea of, and I don't know if there's going to be much of a demand for him on the trade market, but I love the idea of Jameis and Winston going to Denver for the same reasons that I said with, those big receivers. I think that he would just be a match made in heaven for that Denver offense. You got Cortland Sutton coming back, getting able to catch those deep jump balls. You've got Jerry Jeudy, who can separate, which would minimize his ability of throwing interceptions. And then you've got Fant, who can take the dump offs and just rack up the yards after the catch. So the idea of Jameis Winston in Denver is really intriguing to me. So, when I'm making this move, that's kind of what I'm projecting in my head, is that Jameis Winston is going to be the week 1 starter in Denver. Taysom Hill is going to be the week 1 starter in New Orleans. And I got myself 2 QB1s in the late rounds.
And with Winston too, I think that, like you mentioned, and we could throw Carolina into this mix. I think Carolina is the most quarterback desperate team out there right now, even more desperate than Chicago. I don't think Chicago is desperate, Dave. I just think they're kind of confused.
Yeah,
I just think they're kind of disoriented and don't really understand what's happening and how to make it all work. I think that Carolina, that Tepper rule, they want to, and fast, upgrade at quarterback. I mean, it was not trivial that they put the number 8 pick on the table for Stafford. And we may look back, as long as the Rams keep winning, the number 8 pick might be worth more than the entire package that Detroit got for Stafford in terms of draft picks. Of course, they also took on Goff's contract, whatever that's worth. But the number 8 pick, I mean, it may land you one of the top 4 quarterbacks this year, and it's just a very, very valuable pick. So they have Robbie Anderson, they have DJ Moore, they have Christian McCaffrey. Mm-hmm. Although you keep hearing whispers about, well, maybe Christian McCaffrey could be part of a trade package for Deshaun Watson.
Which I'd find it pretty difficult for any team to want to take on that McCaffrey contract. That's one of those, in hindsight, McCaffrey's a great player, don't get me wrong, but when have we ever seen a quarterback or a running back outside of maybe Adrian Peterson in the Vikings? It is very, very rare for a running back to get a monster contract like that and play to his full potential through the end of it. So I think that if they're able to find anybody willing to take that contract, which the Texans might be the only franchise that would be willing to do so. I think it wouldn't be in their worst interest to get rid of him, especially after seeing how great Mike Davis played last year. I mean, I'm not saying that Christian McCaffrey is replaceable, but there's definitely a hint of a system running back after seeing what Mike Davis was able to do last season.
What's fascinating too about that is that the new regime signed McCaffrey to that contract. The other one I'll toss out there, by the way, since you brought it up, is Marshawn Lynch with Seattle. He absolutely played up to the big contract he got.
Absolutely.
I just got to say that because, Marshawn Lynch is my president.
Hey, I get it. I mean, he made that whole contract just on that playoff run, dragging 8 defenders with him all the way into the end zone. That's $100 million right there.
This all comes back to Russell Wilson too, that like he was really the heart of that team. When Lynch was the heart of that team. Anyway, so we'll see. Carolina, Denver, Denver is just oozing with talent at the wide receiver and tight end positions. But, you have this situation. My brain is struggling here for a metaphor, Dave. It's like you have all this caviar and all this fine food, but it's in these cans and you have no can opener. You need a quarterback that can be the can opener,
and having this fully tricked out Rolls Royce and you don't have your driver's license yet.
Yeah. Drew Lock doesn't have his driver's license yet. They don't just let him go slow in the driveway. And John Elway can bring in a big fish. There's still a lot of other shoes to drop, even though we've already seen, arguably, we've seen 3 quarterback moves. 2 moves, but one that involved 2 quarterbacks and then Carson Wentz, that are as big as any quarterback move you'll see in any offseason. And it is great because the NFL GMs are more open now to kind of playing fantasy football.
Right.
Making things happen. It used to be that trades never happen in the NFL. Anything else when you just that pops into your head looking over, because I'm always working on something that I never actually finish and I never actually publish. This is like listeners of the show know this. I just want to kind of go over, every team has questions right now, whether it be the draft, like, are they going to address this position in the draft or free agency? Is this player going to be a cap cut? Those are coming in drip, drip, drip every day today. Duke Johnson, with some word, by the way, from Aaron Wilson, that the team wants to keep David Johnson. David Johnson only $2 million. Good. You ready to go? Run with that. Here, I'm handing the ball off to you.
At a cheaper price, which is the one thing that a lot of people seem to overlook. They didn't say we want to keep David Johnson for $8 million. They said, hey, if we can cut his contract down and restructure his deal. Now, I got a lot of heat today on Twitter because I'm a huge David Johnson fan. If you look at it last season, if you take out that one game where he was injured after 3 or 4 carries or something like that, you take that game out of his average, he was the running back 11 in a point per game basis last year. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people like to, and I get it. I have some players that have burned me repeatedly, and I just like to steer away from them. And David Johnson has done that for a long time. And he did it last year by missing, 5 games right before the playoffs. But when he played, he still had it. He looked really good. And I get it. He was the number 1 overall pick, and he broke his hand and screwed over a lot of fantasy owners. And then whatever happened in 2019 in Arizona, that's a wholly different story, but I could understand why that would put a bad taste in your mouth. But at the end of the day, David Johnson is still a really, really good running back. So somebody that I'm looking at, if like right now, his ADP is projected in the 5th and 6th round, which is bonkers. I think as we get closer to the season, it's going to start to creep up into that 3rd round. But as an RB2 after you can lock in a wide receiver, I am loving David Johnson next year if he can stay in Houston.
And he's not even going to necessarily be that expensive, I think. And you're right. I mean, let's talk about David Johnson's season because, as you said, 2019 in Arizona was a little bizarre. And coming out of the season, we had to say, okay, is David Johnson washed up? And Bill O'Brien just traded his wonderful Danish for a crummy doorstop. And that's just how it worked out as the league laughed. Or is there something still there? At least we were going to get to find out. And I remember week 1, we saw that old David Johnson burst that run to the pylon. Like, oh, okay. Yeah. He's not washed. But it was still a Texans offense that was dysfunctional in the running game. Duke Johnson was still there doing his thing of taking enough opportunity to keep the number 1 running back from having sustainable fantasy value, but also not having sustainable fantasy value of his own. And then in the last month of the year, especially in the passing game, because that was the thing, was like they just remembered, oh yeah, David Johnson's one of the best receiving running backs in the league.
Yep.
And voila, he was a tremendous fantasy back down the stretch. Now, I would say, honestly, the Texans, if they will give him like just $3 or $4 million this year, go ahead and stay. Because we saw, what did Leonard Fournette get, like $2 million, basically? James Conner is out there. And there's even some guys that you're probably going to get for the veteran minimum if you just want depth, like Wayne Gallman.
Carlos Hyde,
Carlos Hyde, exactly. How many teams are going to go ahead and if they have an opening, who are we looking at here? Atlanta, Miami. There's, we could name off a few other teams that are looking at their running back room, maybe Denver, and saying, okay, we need to have an answer. Why wouldn't you draft somebody? Or why wouldn't you try to make a run at Aaron Jones or Chris Carson? It's not like anybody's going to give David Johnson a lead back job. So it also was a question because I thought it was fascinating when Le'Veon Bell was talking at the Super Bowl. He said, well, I could have gone to Miami and become the man there, but I was just so tired of losing with the Jets. So, I don't know what David Johnson wants at this point in his career. He's made enough.
Right. Yeah, I think for him, the best move is to stay in Houston. Whether Deshaun plays or not, I think that he could actually have a better fantasy season if Deshaun doesn't play. His biggest strength is his pass catching ability, being able to get open in space and make those plays. And you didn't see those checkdowns and those dump offs with Deshaun Watson. He just tucked the ball and run himself. So if we get a quarterback that's going to stand in the pocket and not be as mobile as Deshaun Watson, I think that's just even better for David Johnson's value. I love that this turned into a 10-minute David Johnson talk, by the way, because I am all about it.
Well, the point of this is, even if you don't find David Johnson that interesting, like I was saying, the article I want to put together, if I could ever organize my brain and do it, is for every team, there's at least one, but often multiple questions like this. And if you take a stand or you just try to calculate the percentages and play the percentages, because, Dave, this is the kind of thing like the brave new world of this world that we're in, our little sandbox. You can bet on everything now, or if you can't bet on it now, wait a few years and you'll be able to bet on it. Where is David Johnson? Who's he going to play for? Like we started out with Deshaun Watson. And these are the kind of questions that even if you're not in dynasty leagues or you're not doing best ball drafts early. And by the way, just to put a sharper point on this, because I'm doing it's Footballguys. there have been 16 team best ball survivor leagues that are drafted at each. The WSL, the winter, the PDSL, the pre-draft, at different points in the calendar. These have been going on even longer than I knew about Football Guys. So 20 years, I think, in the and it's it's great to even get to be a part of them because it's drafting with people that have been doing this for years and years and years and years. Right now, let me tell you the running backs that are the running back that went right ahead. David Johnson was the 124th pick in this draft. The running back that went right before him. And since it's Football Guys message board handles, I love it. The old Yeller, the Shark Pool. At 124, Shadowfax took David Johnson. At 123, Maggot Brain, great song, great album, took Damian Harris. And at 125, Busman took Devin Singletary. So, I mean, hey, out of Damian Harris, David Johnson, and Devin Singletary, I do think David Johnson has the best chance of being fantasy relevant. And certainly, 123 is like and this is a tight end premium, and there's some other things, 6 points per pass.
Super flex and
no super flex because the rules haven't been updated since the beginning. So
I guess also 16 teams is pretty tough to do.
It makes it rough. It makes it rough. I not that anyone cares about my team. I had pick 126 and took Jalen Waddle, so you can take rookies too. That's another thing is you can try to get out of the head of the curve on.
It's good value.
Well, I didn't take a wide receiver in my first 5 picks. My first 5 picks were like George Kittle, Joe Mixon, James Robinson. James Robinson's going to be fine, everybody. Yeah? Tell everybody he's going to be fine. Do you care that he's an undrafted free agent?
Well, first of all, I'm a Chicago guy. My wife went to Illinois State. So James Robinson was somebody that I had my eyes on way before he was ever a thing. And he's going to be fine. You know what he reminds me of? I feel like such a homer. I keep going back to Bears talk, but he reminds me of Jordan Howard in 2016. Yeah. We saw that where they were rebuilding, and then it was the year before Mitch. Jordan Howard was an RB1, and then they drafted Mitch, and they didn't want to spend any money on a running back. They didn't want to use any draft capital on a running back. So once again, they took Jordan Howard and just relentlessly fed him the rock. And I think that's what we're going to see with James Robinson. If you're looking at hardcore dynasty leagues and trying to project 5 to 7 years out, sure, there's a case that he doesn't have the pedigree, whatever it may be. But if we're looking at next year, lock him in as an RB1. He's going to be great.
Yeah. And everything in the Jags offense is going to be better and easier this year. Everything. Mm-hmm. So whatever James Robinson did, like swimming upstream in that offense last year, now he's going to be able to, catch the current,
if they can get those holding calls under control. What did he have? Like 4 or 5 touchdowns called back on holding calls?
I know. That's a good pull.
My gosh.
That's a really good pull because that's probably one of those things that regresses to the mean. And James Robinson, and I took Kareem Hunt because it's Survivor, and you start 2 running backs. I just want to make sure I have 3 running backs, and whatever happens, Joe Mixon hasn't exactly stayed healthy. But by the way, Joe Mixon, I picked 3rd overall, and George Kittle was my first round pick. Joe Mixon went 30th. So Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders. My talking point, Dave, has been there's going to be a running back that you have 5 or 7 spots higher than everybody else. For everybody, it's going to be a different running back. There's going to be a running back you take in the 2nd or 3rd round in every single draft. Like, you're just not going to understand why he's there. You're like, let's keep, as long as Miles Sanders is there in the 3rd round, I'm going to keep taking Miles Sanders or Joe Mixon or whoever.
Joe Mixon for me. That is Joe Mixon for me. If he's staring at me in the 2nd round of any draft, I can't pass on him. Yeah. I mean, it's just, he's got the talent. He's got the opportunity. Burrow's coming back. I'm a huge Mixon fan.
Yeah, that's what's fun is thinking about these offenses where, hopefully the Bengals bring in reinforcement on the offensive line and we'll actually get to see what this offense can become. The Jags with Trevor Lawrence and an Urban and Bevel, and we'll see what comes of that. But these are exactly the kinds of things you can get out ahead of because people are inching up the value of DJ Chark or inching up the value of Laviska Shenault, but it's very rational to say they're not doing it enough. If you overpay, this is my stump speech right now, right? Overpaying right now for players whose situations are going to change, if you are out ahead of how they're going to change, will be a value after they change.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, last year we saw T. Higgins. People were saying he was overvalued. Tyler Boyd started creeping up draft boards a little bit, but when Burrow was playing, those guys were still outperforming their ADP. Yeah. So right now, Shenault and Chark, they might see a little bit of an uptick, but I agree with you, it's not enough. I mean, both of those guys are going to have low end wide receiver 1 ceilings next year.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what they do.
Tough thing is knowing which one it's going to be.
Well, and they very well could draft a wide receiver in the first round too. So we'll see. We'll see. I thought I saw Keelan Cole connected to the Bears. Actually, Bears they're gonna franchise tag Allen Robinson, right?
Well, let's not forget they got. Man, you're asking me. I couldn't tell you. I think that there's a chance he has made his distaste for the Bears extremely obvious. So I think that if they end up franchise tagging him, you might see one of those.
Yep.
Kenny Galladay situations, where he's got a nagging injury that's just going to keep him off the field the entire year. So I think they're playing with fire by slapping a franchise tag on Allen Robinson. I think if they were to bring in a good quarterback, he'd have no problem playing under franchise tag. But if they're going to try to roll out Mitch another year and franchise tag Robinson, it's bad business on the Bears' part, and I wouldn't blame Robinson for sitting out.
Yeah, we'll see. You mentioned Kenny Galladay. Kenny Galladay can get the tag too. Both of these guys are potential tag and trade candidates, or maybe you just tag Allen Robinson and you tell him we're going to get a quarterback, and then if you don't, maybe you try to deal him. I don't know.
Yeah, it is. Feel bad for these players though, don't you? These guys that like clearly want out of their team so badly and just keep getting brought back, and it's kind of tough to see as a fan. Like if Kenny Galladay. It's not. He didn't want to play last year with Matt Stafford. I don't think there's any chance he wants to stay in Detroit next year and play with Jared Goff. And again, I can't read his head, but from what we've seen, I think it would be pretty silly for them to slap a franchise tag on Galladay.
Well, I mean, I think that it would be ill-advised for them to give Galladay like a 4-year, $80 million contract or whatever it would take to sign him. I just don't think he fits with Jared Goff well. I do think that, and here's why I'm saying this, Dave. When the Dolphins tagged Jarvis Landry, I thought this is never going to work, and they got like a 4th and a 7th, but they got a 4th and a 7th that year, which is better than a comp 3rd the following year, and
they did trade him mid-season on the tag, didn't they?
Yeah, they traded him to Cleveland. It actually worked. Right. And if Jarvis Landry, and I like Jarvis Landry a lot as a player, he's got a lot of dog in him, but he's not Allen Robinson. He's not Kenny Galladay. What those guys bring is pretty rare compared to what Landry brings. So now, granted, there's not as many teams with copious cap room like there was back then. Anyway, I do feel bad for them in a sense. I wanted to look it up because like my brain, I like to say, Dave, I'm only 98% sure of anything at this point. Somebody had said that, and anytime I want to like give somebody props for something they said on Twitter, I can never remember who said it. It was my man Rotobahn, Pete Davidson.
Right. Yeah.
He said the franchise tag is the tractor beam of the NFL. That they're trying to get away, and you just
you pulled them back. Speaking of Dak, is that what we're seeing with Dak again this year? Is he just going to keep pulling him back in every single year? I will say though, if there's anybody that makes sense to get franchise tagged, it is Dak. There's so much uncertainty with how he's going to rebound. I think that's a given. The fact that it hasn't been finished already is mind-blowing to me.
Well, it's because of Jerry Jones. So this is good because this is one where we can do math, right? Like we can do solve for X, and X is what is Jerry Jones thinking?
All right,
okay?
Let's do it.
We can do solve for X, okay? So, and let me say this. I definitely have emotional rooting interests in the NFL. I root against Jerry Jones. I may root for some of the players on the Cowboys. I know some wonderful people that are Cowboys fans. But remember, I grew up a Steelers fan in Western Pennsylvania, so the Cowboys were like the enemy, just like the antithesis of the Steelers. Not like the Browns. That's another story. But even like
I get
rivalries, the rivalries with teams like the Raiders or the Oilers. That was like your cousin that like really ticked you off because they were like you, but the Cowboys were just the antithesis of the Steelers. But Jerry Jones, so I was doing a spot in Atlanta the other day, and they asked me about Dak Prescott. And look, I'm just using human psychology, Dave. If they didn't meet the contract request of Dak Prescott 2 years ago, and they didn't meet it last year, why would Jerry Jones now agree when his price is even more? than it was a year ago or 2 years ago. And why would Dak Prescott, and this is where I'm sending this out like telepathically to Prescott in his camp, like, don't back down. Like, basically say, this is the contract, whatever, Deshaun Watson's contract or something, or not quite Patrick Mahomes' contract, but 4 years, 160 million, 120, 130 guaranteed up front, or whatever the years, because I guess that was the problem last year, right? They agreed on an annual year, but Dak wanted.
They offered 4, he wanted 5, is what it was.
I think it was the other way around. He wanted 4 because remember, the sooner your contract's up, the more, or the earlier you get reset to the market value.
Right.
And they could have signed Dak 2 years ago for under 30 million a year. They probably could have signed him for like 35, between 30 and 35 last year. So now I want Jerry Jones to get punished. I want the universe to punish him. And if he didn't want to pay him at these other 2 points, either Jerry just doesn't want to let go of the money, or he doesn't completely believe in Dak. That's the X, right? Mm-hmm. There's just no way to explain this situation without. So I think there's definitely a non-zero chance that Dak is playing elsewhere next year, because he can franchise tag him this year for $37 million. That's fine. Next year, I think it does limit to 3, but next year you're talking more like 50 million.
Yeah, it's got to be at least 45-50 million if he wants a long-term deal next year. And I don't know if Dallas is going to want to pony that up.
If they didn't want to do 25 or 33,
right.
I mean, it's not looking more attractive. So who knows? And I wonder if in back channels teams are just, hey, if you're looking at trading Dak, we'll listen.
So what would Dak have to do this year? He'd have to rebound from an injury,
right,
and then probably throw for 6,000 yards and 40 touchdowns in order to get that long-term deal. So, I mean, he's going to have to put up a historic season in order to get that long-term contract. So I think we probably see him get franchise tag for 1 more year.
Yeah,
but, if he comes out looking like he did last year, if he looks fully healed from the injury, and if he's as dominant as he was, we might see a midseason extension. But, like you said, he hasn't offered to pay up now. I'd be surprised if he does at this point.
And how could Dak feel good about signing any deal with the team after that? I don't care if Jerry's like, okay, fine, I'll give you $50 million a year. Why would you want to tie up your future with an organization that showed you in so many ways that they weren't willing to give you what you'd earned?
Well, I can give you 250 million reasons.
Well,
sure. I could say yes.
Yeah, but somebody else will give him 250 million next year. Somebody else will, and a franchise that I think will appreciate him. Where the Cowboys, because this is the part that really burns me up, because the Cowboys have already banked some great football on rookie contract, 4th round rookie contract rates. So they've already banked like $100 million in surplus value from him.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you lose 10 or 20 million at the margin, and I'm going back 2 years ago or 1 year ago, if I was advising Jerry Jones to say, who cares if you lose 10 or 20 million at the margin, where like you're a businessman and you're not used to losing deals. You already won. You won whenever Dak Prescott became this revelation. As
look
a
at
rookie.
the overall investment. Yeah. You don't look at what he's making in the future. You look at what he made in the past, what he's going to make in the future, average it all out, and it's a great deal for the Cowboys. It's mind-numbing that they haven't been able to figure this out. And it's been one of the top storylines for almost 3 years.
Well, it's Jerry Jones, just NFL owners. We could do like let's branch off. I'll do a whole series on the couch. Let's just get into NFL owners. All right. I'll tell you about a great deal. A great deal is that Dave Kluge is on the Footballguys staff, and we're gonna have a couple other interviews. So we're gonna go off the rails here last 10 minutes or so, Dave.
Sure.
Dave, I guess where I would start is why fantasy sports, or why sports, or where does the story start for you of sports being such a big part of your life, particularly like watching, predicting, thinking about them?
That's a question I have pondered many times. I started playing fantasy sports when I was young. I joined my dad's league, and I kicked all of his friends' butts when I was 11 years old, and they kicked me out of the league after that, and then I didn't play for about 3 years. Yeah, so this was in the very early age of internet fantasy football, and, I was just on the computer more than they were, so I was, scouring waiver wire picks all the time. I think by the end of the season, I had Donovan McNabb, Randy Moss, Terrell Owens. I mean, I had everybody on my team because they were trying to play bye weeks, and I was just sitting there, a little 11-year-old, snagging everyone off the waiver wire and, just out hustling these guys pretty much. And then when I got into high school, I was playing football. I was playing football with a few of my friends, and we just threw together this league, and it just took off. It's something that we've slowly been raising the stakes year over year over year. You can see my name all over the trophy.
Wow.
Playing for quite some time.
So are you currently the holder of that trophy? Like, did you win in 2020? So you're currently the holder of that trophy?
I came in third place in 2020.
So why do you have the trophy then?
I have to mail it back. They all live in Chicago, and it's one of those chores that I've just been putting off for a while. Sentimental reasons. I don't want to get it off my desk.
I understand. Well, so you could have it to show everybody during the show. It needs to be part of the background for as long
2019, my name's on there. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
But no, it's something that I just started playing when I was young. And the way I actually got started, I never even thought about any sort of career or anything like that in fantasy sports. I was just a fantasy football junkie. I was in a bunch of leagues. I was playing with my friends, and I started anonymously posting articles on Reddit. So didn't even have my name tied to it, just a text post where I would just write this big long thing, blah, 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 blah. This is what I think is going to happen. And I was anonymously sharing these to Reddit, and somebody from Fantasy Pros reached out to me and said, hey, these are pretty good. Have you ever thought about writing? And I said, no, I haven't thought about writing, but sure, why not? And that was about a year and a half ago, and it has just kind of spiraled from there. Yeah. I didn't even hop on Twitter until August. I was working with Fantasy Pros, and then I said, you know what? It seems like there is a lot of fantasy football action on Twitter, and then I started writing articles for a few different websites. And then somebody asked me to guest on their podcast, and I said, wow, this is even more fun talking about football than it is writing about football. So then I started my own show and started reaching out to some people. And I want to give a huge shout out to Ian Harditz. I reached out to him when I had nobody, no followers, no audience, anything. And I just said, hey, man, I'm trying to do this thing. And just instantly goes, yeah, when do you want me to come on? So he hopped on my show. That kind of gave me a little bit of a selling point. Hey, I had Ian Harditz on my show last week. And then Mike Taglair joined me. And then JJ Zachariason joined me. And I just kept having these awesome conversations with these guys in the industry. And then, I had Joe come on my show. And that was an awesome experience. Joe and I clicked. And now I'm at Footballguys. And it's still a bit surreal to me, if I'm being honest.
Well, part of what's surreal about this community is that in a time when the internet is kind of known for the toxic culture that you encounter, we generally uplift each other. We support each other. I think there's this an idea, and I know when I started the couch, it's funny. I don't really have true delusions of grandeur. Maybe I'm self-aggrandizing a bit, but I do think at the time there wasn't a show where the format of the show was to have people from all over the industry, because it was more like, especially if you go back around the time I was getting started 15 years ago, so it was walled gardens, and the idea is that you never even really acknowledged other sites existed. Those were your competitors,
right?
But the table grows more and more every year, and now with sports gambling becoming more legal in more states, and it's merging through things like player props with fantasy, there's enough for everybody. There's enough for everybody. And like you said, we just, like Brian Drake, who we got our Syracuse connection. He works with Dwayne McFarland. Does a good show with him. He was asking me behind the scenes, like, about making it in this industry and things like that, like just what it means, like more of like he's working on an article about just the perspectives on this. And I just said, well, as long as you're doing work that you like doing, you've kind of made it, But also, if you are creating relationships that will last outside of fantasy or really transcend the fantasy circle, that's how you know you're winning, right? And I think that's actually, especially, we were the original social distancers, all of us sitting in front of our computer in our mom's basement, right? You might have literally been in your mom's basement when you were winning that league, picking up all those players.
It was. I very much so was.
And we create friendships and connections that will last long after this. And it's a way for like a soul to reach out to another soul or to make contact with another soul. And I think what's really awesome, and I think we're going to touch on this with some of the other new staffers, is I can feel in this, God, what are we at now? Like the fourth wave of fantasy, something like that. Because I feel like I was part of the second wave. And then there was a third wave in DFS. But it feels like you all like really love each other and really just thoroughly enjoy being in each other's worlds. Is there anybody that you want to shout out of this very exciting, enthusiastic world that you're part of?
Well, Troy King Most definitely.
Yeah,
I know he's
Monday.
coming on your show next
Yeah.
week, right? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, Troy is just such a good guy. We were just talking today about, we've been he was somebody I connected with when I was brand new in the industry, because every time I'd sign on Twitter, I would see Troy King, Troy King, Troy King just in my feed constantly, and everybody loved him. It didn't seem like he had any trolls or enemies or anything, so I reached out to him and asked him for some advice, and he just really kind of took me under his wing at the time and helped introduce me to some people and give me some opportunities. And yeah, it's crazy. When I started in this industry, I thought Twitter is going to be a great platform for me to share my content and get it out to the public. And now here I am, and I've made like genuine, deep friendships with people that I'm talking to. And then even before Twitter, I mean, I talked about my high school league here. We had one guy drop out of the league about 5 years ago, and there was a friend of a friend who, we went to high school together, wasn't really friends with him, but he pulled him into the league. And now, shout out Keith. He's not on Twitter or anything like that, but Keith has become one of my best friends through fantasy football. Went to high school together, weren't in the same group of friends, whatever. Now we're in the league together, and he's one of my best friends. So, yeah, you talk about how fantasy football really can bring people together, and it certainly can. So Troy King's the one guy I definitely want to shout out. And then Adam Koffler is another one. He works with me at Fantasy Pros. We got hired within about a month of each other. And both of us at the time didn't really know what we were doing. We were just working our butts off, writing articles, writing news blurbs, trying to figure it out. And we have really leaned on each other really closely for the last year and a half now, and have become, genuine friends. So I'm out here in Colorado. He's out there in Florida. We haven't had a chance to meet face to face yet, but Adam, if you're watching, shout out to you. You've been my day one in this community.
Yeah, and by the way, for all young people out there, I'm not that old, but I can use the term young people. Nobody knows what they're doing. I have a law degree, Dave. I wouldn't even say if I'm proud of it or ashamed of it. It's just there. It's helped me now. The things I've learned. But I always tell people, I'll save you $100,000. Maybe I should update that to say that $50,000 in 3 years. And I'll tell you, this is the secret they teach you in law school. Everybody is making it up as they go along. And you can too. You can too. You can too. I mean, that's one of the things that really, I'll go off the rails here if I say some of the things we've learned about leadership in our country over the last year or so is that the people who are the leaders aren't really qualified in a lot of cases to be the leaders. And there's no reason your imagination shouldn't limit what you think you're capable of, because everybody is in over their head. Okay. The last thing, Dave, before we go, what's something else you're passionate about? What's something else? I forget who was on Twitter that started this. It was a good one. What's something else you're passionate about?
This is such an easy one for me. I moved to Colorado 3 years ago for mountain climbing. It's something that, oh my gosh, my wife and I over Thanksgiving about 4 years ago, we went to Arizona. We were down there with her family for Thanksgiving, woke up early in the morning, climbed Camelback Mountain, which isn't anything big, nothing too hard, but made it up to the top. And I was just sitting up there and I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. And that was in November. We went back home to Chicago. We said our lease ends in May. Let's move to Colorado and make this a lifestyle. So we've been out here. This is heading into our fourth summer. Last year, we got married in June, did a nice little COVID wedding, but our honeymoon was stripping everything that we had, every luxury from our lives, spent 28 days living out of a car, living out of a backpack. And right now we're going through trying to climb the 58 peaks in Colorado that are over 14,000 feet. And we're over 50% of the way through, hoping to knock out the rest this summer.
I wish I'd asked you about that like 5 minutes in, and we just could have talked about that the whole time, because that's fantastic. And there's a whole, I've seen some good mountain climber documentaries. Like, I forget the name of the guy. And it's great that you and your wife can do it together, because the one that sticks in my mind, I can't remember his name.
And we bring the dog. The dog loves him.
Oh, I'm sure. And they're incredibly dexterous, like able to,
like a freaking mountain goat.
Exactly.
I'm trying to figure out this route, and he just runs his way right up there.
Right. Well, actually, the dog is probably useful, right? The dog's like, this is the way. And I can't remember the name of the mountain climber, but he was like a loner. He's the guy who did like the first climb in lots of different places. I can't remember his name, but he was a loner. Like, he was married to mountain climbing. And it's great that you and your wife can get even more into each other through. That's just fantastic.
Yeah. And it's something that not a lot of people understand. They're like, wait, you guys do what? You wake up at 2:30 in the morning and climb up to the top of a mountain. It's something that it's not for everybody, but it's something that we have found a deep passion in and just absolutely love.
Yeah, no, it's rarefied air, and who knows where it will lead. No, that That's terrific. And I don't want to be too on the nose here, but it makes sense that you would ascend in the fantasy circles in a year and a half. That's just you, man. That's your
I like that connection.
Yeah, that's just how you are in this place on this plane. And now that plane includes football guys. So again, folks, Dave Kluge, KLUGE_FF. He mentioned Troy King. Troy's going to be on Monday. That's going to be fun. And it's the off season, but I think that it's always invigorating. This is a time where we can relax. We're not working so hard, but we can also make new friends and renew acquaintances with old friends. Thank you all old friends who showed out tonight on the evening couch, an evening couch. And get, as I told Diego, get out your brandy snifter. Let's unwind. Lots of good stuff. Looking forward to from Dave and from Troy and Adam Wild. And it's a good time to be doing what we do. Very much so. So thank you, folks. As always, we love serving you. You are the classiest. Enjoy your weekend.